Well, time now for us to take a look behind the headlines and some of the stories around the world that have caught our eye. First of all, it's our top story, and the Financial Times is covering it too. That's the European Union's plans to overhaul its migration policy. Chinese President Xi Jinping has made a bold pledge in his address to the UN General Assembly. South China Morning Post says he plans to make China carbon neutral by 2060. The West Australian reports on 380 pilot whales which have died on Tasmania's remote west coast. Experts have called it the largest mass stranding ever recorded in Australia. And the 100-year-old coronavirus fundraiser Captain Tom Moore is set to get his own biopic, according to Variety. Well, here with me to review those topics are French and Algerian journalist Nabila Ramdani and author and former journalist Gary Hudson. Great to have you both with us on the programme. So let's talk about our lead story, first of all, which is the EU calling for a compulsory system across the bloc to manage migration. And Gary, the big question is, will they all sign up to a deal like this? Will anyone sign up, or will they all sign up?
Well, it doesn't look like it, does it? They haven't before, and who knows whether they will now, because obviously, sitting here as I am in the UK, we had a big row about all of this stuff a few years ago with the EU, and a lot of people would say that the whole Brexit thing was based to a large degree on the question of control of borders and on the migrant crisis and continuing immigration. Now, obviously, Germany took a lead 5 years ago. It's 5 years since then. And it's taken probably the fire at the camp on Lesbos, where 12,500 people were displaced, to spark some action now, if you forgive that dreadful pun. I mean, it really is a tragedy. It's a human tragedy on a massive scale. And the European leaders historically can't agree. The Eastern European countries don't want anything to do with it. Well, some of them don't. Hungary and Poland don't want anything to do with the migrants. Certainly Austria have said that they don't like this particular policy. And the southern European countries that are having to bear the brunt of it obviously want some help. They've had help from France and Germany to a lesser extent, but of course Italy and Greece are the places that are suffering the most. And the last time the crisis blew up, when it was larger numbers in 2015, we found that their solution was basically to pay billions in aid to Turkey to keep the problem away from European shores, which it hasn't done.
And what do you think, Nabila? Is there any chance that there will be an agreement amongst all EU countries over this?
Well, first of all, I think that all of us can agree that immigration is one of the most important global issues of our time, and that the world has not come to terms with how to deal with it efficiently and indeed fairly. Changes in a very short space of time have been absolutely enormous. And we have now situations when people living in abject poverty in blighted parts of the world can not only learn about the First World, but manage to travel there relatively quickly. And those who are the victims of war and natural disaster, add all those people, and it is absolutely logical that vast numbers now want to move to the advantaged parts of the globe. And Europe is slowly coming to terms with this new world disorder, if I may put it that way, but very slowly indeed. And this call for a compulsory system across the bloc to manage migration, if anything, it's long overdue. And the problem is not that immigration is happening, but that there will always be division over how to respond to a huge influx of economic migrants and indeed refugees. Countries like Greece and Italy, for example, are at the sharp end of the migration crisis, and their views on it are likely to be very different to those of northern countries, which have fewer problems. In Italy and Greece have accused wealthier northern countries of failing to do enough. But a number of Central European nations have been openly resistant to the idea of taking in a quota of migrants. Now, the German-backed pact would require all 27 EU countries to take part, but one imagines that getting agreement on key issues is going to be a nightmare.
Absolutely. I mean, there is perhaps something in it, though, Nabila. Would a unified strategy be the way forward?
Well, I think it's highly unlikely to for all these countries to come together, as was said by the other guests. This issue has been the subject of bickering over decades, and in the context of Brexit, it's hard to imagine a uniform voice, as it were, coming out of a bloc of 27 countries who have different views on what migration is and how immigrants should be treated, let alone welcome.
But Gary, I wonder if following this devastating fire that we had in this refugee camp in Lesbos in the last week or so, is now the time for change finally, do you think? Is this going to be the trigger?
It's been the time for change for, well, as long as I can remember. And certainly 5 years ago, when there was something like, was it 1 million people all in one go from all parts of the globe converging on Europe. And as Nabila rightly says, it's one of those situations now where people are aware of a better life should be available to them. And why not? Why can't Europe open its doors? By the time you spread these people out across the continent, and I'd include Britain in that, but that's just a personal point of view. I know a lot of people would disagree. But why can't we welcome people who are fleeing genuine hardship and in many cases death and persecution? But we don't seem to have that humanitarian strength of opinion in any of the European countries. They're all divided, as we say. And I can't see 27 agreeing. And of course it's the time for action. Of course it's the time to show some compassion.
Yeah.
Yes, well, let's see. OK, let's move on to our second story, which is China says it will aim for carbon neutrality by 2060. So, Nabila, people are saying that this is a significant step in the fight against climate change. Do you think this is a significant step?
On the surface, this is excellent news. China is by far the world's biggest producer of greenhouse gases, and the world absolutely needs the big beasts to play the biggest part in cutting down on carbon dioxide emissions. The unexpectedly enthusiastic commitment by the Chinese will give fresh impetus to all other countries and crucially to the United Nations. The UN's effort to galvanize action on climate crisis has sadly been flagging because of the coronavirus pandemic, and societies that are being wrecked by a health emergency are not best placed to work on ecological measures. An obvious problem with ambitious pledges like this is, of course, that 2060 is a very long way away, and a 2020 administration is not going to be in trouble if in 40 years' time things don't work out as planned. But again, this is a positive statement of intent, and it fits in with the spirit of the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change. Last week, the EU came forward with strengthened commitments under the Paris Agreement, pledging out emissions cuts by 35% by 2030. And China's pledge to bring forward a strengthened national plan is a major boost to the prospect for next year's vital UN climate summit, which will be hosted in London and called the COP26. And now COP26 is viewed as one of the last chances to put the world on track to meet the of the 2015 Paris Agreement, to hold global heating to well below 2 degrees Celsius, which is regarded as the limit of safety.
Yes, absolutely. I was going to, sorry to interrupt you there, Nabila. Gary, what is interesting about this is the timing, isn't it? China has until now avoided committing to a long-term goal. So why now?
Well, I wonder whether, and I don't want to be cynical about this, it could have something to do with the situation in the United States, where you have a president who is obviously not so much a climate change denier as a climate change ignoramus. He doesn't seem to understand the issues involved and has actually obviously blamed China quite overtly, and he's used China as an excuse for withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. And China is now very publicly answering back. Now, I hope it is a sign of a change of heart in Beijing. I do hope it is a sign that they are committed to this, albeit very, very long term, because after all, I think the EU and and the UK have talked in terms of 10 years earlier for being carbon neutral, and most ecologists and environmentalists say that is also too late. But I hope it is a genuine change of heart and that they will stick to it, because there's more chance of their policy being pursued by subsequent regimes, in China being the one-party state that it is, than Trump's rather crazy attitude to the whole thing being pursued by an alternative administration in the United States.
Yes, well, let's wait and see. Let's hope it does make a difference. Let's head now to Australia, then, which is undergoing its worst ever whale stranding. And Nabila, we don't know much about why this happens, which makes it really hard to stop it happening, doesn't it?
Well, indeed, it's an absolutely horrific story, and the kind that really sends a chill down your spine. Seeing all these magnificent creatures stranded on a beach and indeed dying is incredibly sad. And I've seen some of the pictures taken from the air, and they are awful. Rescuers are fighting to save the remaining 30 that are still alive. But often there is very little they can do, and they are struggling in freezing waters and fading light to free the whales. But it's an incredibly hard job. The refloating process involves as many as 5 people per whale, wading waist deep in the water, attaching slings to the animals so they can be guided out of the harbour by a boat. And that is as hard as it sounds. And whale stranding is in itself something that it remains a mystery, and it makes it even more heartbreaking. I mean, the whales may have taken a wrong turn and chased their prey in shallow waters, for example. They blindly followed a dying matriarch who intended to beach herself.
Yes, it's always. Sorry to interrupt you. I feel like it's quite an emotional thing to see it, isn't it? Let's move on from that story to our final one. I don't want to not leave enough time to talk about the fundraising hero, Captain Tom Moore, who will be getting his own biopic. And Gary, he's had a really incredible life, hasn't he? He's well worth a film.
It's a great story. It's a fantastic story. The bit of it that amuses me the most is who's going to play him, because there aren't many 100-year-old actors around. But as we've seen from Martin Scorsese's recent film, The Irishman, we can make actors look any age we want to through the wonders of modern technology and CGI. So, I mean, why not Robert De Niro to play Captain Tom? Or if you want, he's talked already, he's mentioned Mike Caine, who's obviously a veteran British actor. He's mentioned Anthony Hopkins. And I think to take a Michael Caine line from The Italian Job, he would have to say, you're only supposed to have raised £1,000 for your 100th birthday. And of course, it's nearer 39 million for the National Health Service. Yeah, it's a great story, but I would be interested in who are playing. I think he's quite a diminutive gentleman, isn't he? He's quite small. And maybe Tom Cruise.
Absolutely. I gather he's mentioned, as you said, Michael Caine or potentially Anthony Hopkins. And Nabila, we need an uplifting story like this at the moment, don't we? Something positive to focus on.
Well, absolutely. And Captain Moore is an absolutely amazing person who has served other people all his life and now he's more famous than ever. But never mind somebody playing Tom Moore in a biopic. I'm just amazed that he hasn't been announced as the new James Bond, frankly. And I don't see why young men like Michael Caine and Anthony Hopkins, who are only in their 80s, should be playing him. I think the captain is quite capable of playing himself.
That's a great idea. Can I just say that?
Well, that's a thought, actually.
Yeah, it did cross my mind that Daniel Craig is considered now too old to be James Bond, but he's not too old to be Tom Moore, is he?
And why not? I can't let you leave without asking you briefly, who would play you both in your life film? I'm going to ask you first, Gary. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, I think Michael Caine would do for me, quite frankly. Thank you very much. Yeah. I'd settle for Michael Caine.
Yeah,
he's very versatile.
He's
a British icon.
I don't know if
my life... What about you, Nabila? Who would be you?
I don't think if my life would be worth being, depicted at all, frankly.
I don't know about that. I've chosen Jennifer Lawrence. I think I might be a little bit optimistic there, but that would really work for me. Thank you so much indeed for joining us on Behind the Headlines. Nabila Ramdani and Gary Hudson. Many thanks.